just briefly, before we get into the presentation, I want to remind many of you here tonight that this process for this field started 9 years ago. There have been over 40 public meetings regarding this project. It started as a concept at the middle school at Branch River. And toward the end of the discussions prior to COVID, it started to become clear that it made more sense to migrate this project to the high school field. Originally alumni. During subsequent public meetings, it was decided to move from alumni to Gled Hill. I want to remind everybody, again, there were 40 public meetings. These are announced meetings. Nothing was done behind closed doors. These are all open agenda items. So this project is nothing new, and it has been discussed for quite some time. Okay, Mr. McCormick.
Yes, I'm Jeff McCormick. I'm a resident in town. I'm the project manager for this project and other projects going on in town.
And I don't know if we can hear you.
Who's your mic? Okay, let's try this again. Good evening, everybody. I'm Jeff McCormick. I am
Still can't hear you.
Okay, how about now?
Can you give him one of the ones on the table maybe, or is that the same one?
It's the same one.
Okay,
How about now?
oh,
A little bit better?
there you go.
Okay. All right. Hi, I'm Jeff McCormick. I'm the Director of Public Works, and I'm the project manager for this project ongoing and several others in town right now. For this project, we have 2 contractors on site right now. O'Keefe Trucking is the site contractor that is doing retaining walls, drainage. He stripped the field of the loom, graded the field, and he is going to probably be doing the foundation in a couple weeks. One of the things that we did here was 30 different density tests around the site, because at one time, the biggest concern was sinkholes. But we've gone past that. The density tests were great. We did some infiltration tests. Those worked out well. Yeah. A couple of construction progress pictures here. This thing, a rebar cage for the weight pool. 20 feet deep. You're not going to miss it. You're going to perform on it. That's going to support the weight pool. Oh, I'm sorry. This structure is a light pole rebar foundation. So 4 corners of the field.
Yeah, he's gonna give you a different mic. Okay.
1, 2, hello, hello. I got a girl in Kalamazoo.
Gonna start over again?
Did everybody hear this one? Yeah. 2 contractors, O'Keefe Trucking and Field Turf. Field Turf is doing the grandstands, the lights, and the field. O'Keefe is doing all of the site work around them. This is a rebar cage for the light pole bases, 4 on the corners of the field. This is the progress a couple weeks back when we had the footings for the grandstands in. Jim, right, so you know where we are. These are the grandstands, nearly complete. We have a couple of things to do on the stairs and matching grades. And if you can imagine a press box and concession stand right in the middle here, and some a restroom on the top. We have this plaza that we're trying to do in the back. Along the edges of the field, under the field, when stormwater falls through the turf, through the stone, down to the subgrade here, that is pitched this way, goes into this under drain, goes down to a head wall, I mean a headway pipe, and over to the river out on the left. So in plan here, this is kind of spun around. can see the dome gym here. This is the rink. That picture was taken right here. And those two under drains go to this head pipe, goes down to manhole number 3 for flared end into the river. This manhole will become important. We may be doing some stormwater monitoring. there. Okay, this is a kind of a cross section. You can see there's about a foot of 3/4 inch stone that's going to go in, and then this couple inches of dynamic stone base, and the turf itself will anchor right here along this little curb and this concrete curb. This is actually from Bryant, and not at this point. This is also from Bryant. This is what this concrete curb will be at the perimeter of the field. Nice clean edges. It's going to support a fence, and there'll be a sidewalk on one side. So the finished product, when you see it, we'll have four. We'll have a 4-foot black vinyl fence with man gates, and in the end zone will be a 6-foot fence with a 14-foot high net that's posted going on. So part of this project was supposed to be building a 2,400 square foot field house, 2 locker rooms, outdoor bathrooms. But unfortunately, it cost $1.2 million. So that was taken out of the project at first, but now we've been approved by the council to put in the foundation while we have the rest of the field all torn up. Have a possible grant of $250,000. So hopefully we can build the shell, and maybe the construction technology kids can do some of the fit up. Next, we got a $500,000 grant from Representative Seth Magazina. These are the stands, 1,000-seat bleachers. And we're trying to do a nice handicap plaza, very easy, like 8, 10 handicap spaces, easy access to the action. This would be a press box, concession stand, and restroom. And actually, I think we're going to change the configuration a little bit, move this up here, get the restrooms here, so we got a bigger gathering area right on the top of the stands, looking down over the field. So just about the time that we put the first shovel in the ground and tore up our irrigation line, we started hearing about the PFAS. So really, there are 2 questions. One is, will the field affect the environment, wetlands, or aquifer? And the other one is, will it affect human health from contact? This is all that is related to PFAS. So we have to do our due diligence. We have letters, as Don said, from Rhode Island Department of Health, Rhode Island DEM, Pasco Utility District, and Harrisburg Fire District. So the way to approach this is a scientific method way. We have a question, we have a hypothesis, we have to do some research, we have to gather data, we have to do some tests, we have to analyze those, the data and the tests, then we come to a conclusion. So the first thing for us to do is kind of figure out our aquifer. This is our town, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Long Lake, Pasco Reservoir, the new Pasco Wells. This is where the Harrisville Wells are, in the middle of town of Harrisville. This is the project site, that little yellow rectangle. And then the groundwater here flows from west to east, and more northwest to south. And beyond us, down grading, is the Tarpon Wells, the Glendale, and Maple. And the fun thing is, there's groundwater all under here. Some of it's at the surface, some of it is wetlands, and some of it's 10, 30 feet below grade. So now we get into aquifer. It's been inferred that the aquifer is small and pristine. This is an aquifer overlay district that was created by the town in 2000. It's not water quality. This blue outline, and there's 3 different shades of blue, for the amount of water that's available. It's the transmissivity of water through the ground or groundwater movement. The best water is in this dark zone right here. This is Pasco, this is Harrisville, this is Clear River too. And then it meets the Chepachet, comes the branch, goes up around this little nose, that's the Burrillville Middle School, and then it's the Slaysville Reservoir. So this is not a small area. It is 11 square miles of our 57 square miles. 20% of the town is this aquifer overlay district. High school is actually over in.
Your next slide, slide's got it.
So now we zoom in a little bit. This is just to show the area right around the high school, which way the groundwater is flowing, where the field is, Oakland, and then this again is where the middle school. So the overall flow of groundwater is from west to east. So our town grew up along the river. And all of the businesses, all of the textile mills, all grew up along the river, all our residences. So these are some of the landmarks that are also in the aquifer. The old mobile station site, our cemetery across from Nelson's, the old DPW, Sunoco. Town Hall is right smack dab in the middle of the good border. This is the project location. This is the Whipple Ave landfill and the Clear River Drive landfill, wastewater treatment plant. We're actually working with Northeast Water on some future wells way up here near the middle school. And it's good to note that Harrisville wells, 3 of them are in Atkinson Field, and 3 wells at Harrisville, right behind the district building, are upgrading where this field is. The groundwater flows this way. So another zoomed. This is the project area. This is the high school. This is the best transmissivity, the most amount of water you can get. If you can tell, there's the Clear River landfill and the Whipple Ave. I want to point out that these landfills that were done back in the 70s, when I was a kid, we'd go there and dump a whole pickup truck full of stuff here. There are not liners under these 2 landfills. There are caps on them. Cap them about 10, 15, somewhere 12 and for this one, and maybe 20 for this one. Basically, the stormwater flowing on here goes through all that garbage, creates that juice, goes right down through to the groundwater. Rhode Island Resource Recovery, where our garbage goes now, they have a liner that collects the leachate, treats it, and sends it. Okay, so around this site, we do have some wells that we wanted to do some of the groundwater tests to get a baseline of what PFAS is in this area. So on the landfills, because we've been monitoring landfills for 20 years, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groundwater wells. They're really just 4-inch diameter wells around 50 feet or so, just getting the water table so that they can test it. Right around our high school field site, we put in 2 new groundwater wells just a couple weeks ago. And then there was an abandoned well here, and there's an active irrigation well here. So we're able to, we had Northeast take some samples a couple weeks ago. So we're able to get a baseline of what kind of PFAS we have in the aquifer in this area.
We're not going to have any back and forth right now, just please.
Jump ahead and get there. So we have, this is another just close up so you can see exactly where these wells are. This is the dome gym. This is the rink. This is the irrigation well that's active. It's 300 feet deep. This is the 500-foot well that's abandoned because they didn't get the yield out of it. And then we have our 2 new groundwater wells here on the east side of the river before you get to the lower field. Everybody in this town has had a lesson in PFAS in the past couple of months. And PFAS is in a lot of different materials. So there's pesticides that have PFAS, there's cleaning products, there's there's paint, there's cosmetics, shampoo. We are the consumers. We are buying this stuff. And how is it getting into the groundwater? Well, if you have a conventional septic system, and everybody in this town did before 1980, we would use all those products, flush them down the toilet, or the sink, goes through our septic system, into our infiltration and leach fields, and then down into the groundwater where it starts moving on. After 1980, this area now has sewer. So right now, at the high school, all of their cleaning products, all of their cooking, all of the wax solutions, all of the stripping that goes on for the floors, the drink operations, everything goes into a pipe, goes down, crosses the river, goes down along the side of Whipple landfill, and goes into the wastewater treatment plant. Unfortunately, the treatment plant does not treat the PFAS. In fact, they don't even have to monitor it for it. In a year from now, when they get their permit, they're gonna have to monitor influent that goes into the plant, effluent, and whatever sludge comes out of that plant. So right now, all of this, all of our sewer system that everybody's on, and I'm on it too, all of our stuff that we're flushing down there goes here, doesn't get treated, and goes into the river 600 feet, 600 yards south of where our project is. Before we get into parts per trillion and all the testing and all that, trying to figure out an analogy that would make sense to everybody. So I came up with this. Pasco Reservoir is 325 acres, about 8 feet deep, holds about 1 billion gallons of water. 1 part per trillion, you would need 1,000 Pasco reservoirs, which would be this area, 8 feet deep, with 1 gallon of PFAS in it. So half of Rhode Island with 1 gallon of PFAS in it is about 1 part per trillion. A few years ago, DEM went to all of the landfill owners or operators or monitors and said they wanted to do monitoring for PFOA and PFOS. So they said, we're going to do 2 rounds of it. November 2021 and May 2022. This is the first time we've heard of anybody testing that. So tests were done then, and we have the results from 2022. We also just tested some of the wells as close to the field as we could get, but we haven't got those results back. So in trying to get a baseline PFAS in the area, this is what we got. We got some info from Northeast Water the other day, but I want to go over some of these. 2022, this is D8, D7, D6. The black is just the 2 of the 6 Rhode Island forever chemicals. We got hits of 215, 170 something, let's see that, 466, 100. Whipple was actually not too bad. It was 29 in this well and 5.2 in this one. So this is a smaller landfill. The volume of Clear River Drive landfill is huge. So kind of makes sense why these numbers are bigger. But these bad red numbers, that's the Rhode Island 6. We added all the PFAS 6, Rhode Island 6 up. We get numbers like 588, 350, 1,118 in this well that is literally 300 feet away from our existing well. Around the site, we found in our new monitoring wells, number 2 was 0. Number 1 was 15. The abandoned well was 25, and the irrigation well was 22. The rub here is that the irrigation well is active. We have been irrigating Alumni Field, Glen Hill Field, and the lower field with that well for 22 years. So there has been PFAS contact, our athletes, our coaches, and everybody on those fields for 22 years. So our baseline in this area shows that our aquifer is big for the town. Overall in the town is great. This area right near the landfills and the wastewater treatment plant, not a good spot for a future public well. So those wells are just groundwater monitor. They're not drinking wells. So around the Department of Health right now says if a public water system has over 70 parts per trillion, you shouldn't drink the water. It'll be a no drink order. 70 to 20, they're like, okay, you got to start looking at it and doing something. 0 to 20 is our current threshold, and in 2029, 4 parts per trillion will be the threshold. So I want to point out here that we looked into the Harrisville Water District, their wells, 6 wells that they have, their blended average is only 5. So they're doing good, but they have to do their own due diligence.
Ma'am.
So they got to do their own due diligence to get down to 4, and they can do that by throttling some pumps. So we'll see what happens when the Pasco water comes online. So this was the action plan for our due diligence. We expanded Northeast Water Solutions scope to look into townwide data. We had them test the existing wells at Burrillville High School. They're going to do it quarterly moving forward. They're going to test the wells at Clear River Drive, do that quarterly moving forward. Same thing at Whipple. We installed 2 new monitoring wells already on the field that will also be monitored quarterly. We're going to set up a testing program for runoff for the under drain system in that manhole 3 we had talked about. However, I don't think there's going to be a lot of runoff from this field based on what I've seen in the past few storms. It's really not much runoff in this field. We had TRC companies do our synthetic turf testing on the materials themselves, and they also tested the rubber from in. So with that, I want to hand this over to the real experts. Danielle Akajanian, Bob Ferrari from Northeast Water.
Hi everyone, I'm Danielle Agajanian. I'm a certified public water operator. I'm also a wastewater operator as well. I've been working in various water my full career, starting with wastewater, moving on to drinking water, before that commercial labs, or went to school for biology, working even realized watershed watch labs. I've been doing this for a few years. We got involved in Burrillville. I'll talk more about the past, but we've been doing PFAS monitoring for about 2017 or so. In the last couple months, we've increased our monitoring in town. We've added, like Jeff said, we've added 2 new monitoring wells around the turf field, as well as sampling from the irrigation well and the abandoned irrigation well on site, and completed the sampling within the monitoring wells around the landfill. We were waiting for those results to come in. They should be in any day now. They were sent at the same time as the monitoring wells around the turf field. I'm very curious why those results are taking longer to come in. I can only suspect just because there's more PFAS in those samples. We have, like I was saying, we're under contract right now to do complete quarterly sampling. We've done the first quarter, and then moving forward, we plan on doing more long-term testing, quarterly monitoring, semi-annual monitoring of the landfill. As Jeff was saying, the town has been being monitored for PFAS. There's a fair amount of public water systems in your town. See if I can keep it. The water in your town moves this direction. Starting all the way up here at Wall Lake. This treatment facility, this hospital, is a public water system. Their water was sampled. Wall Lake came back with a result of 1.9 parts per trillion. RIDO's limit is 2, so they consider this a non-detect. But personally, anything above the detection level 1, I count, and I'd like to add that in all my spreadsheets, as you can see going forward in the next slide. But I count this 1.9 It is under 2, so it's considered non-detected for Department of Health, but that was the actual result there. The water system moves down. There's a few wells at Pasco. Harrisville has 6 wells. Well 5 is the one of the most concern that has the highest number of PFAS values. 2 sets of samples were taken, with one of them coming back over 20 parts per trillion. That is a threshold for DOH. Anything over 20 parts per trillion would need treatment for the current regulations. The next round sampling was 16. But due to the fact that all these wells combine in the treatment plant, the water coming out of the treatment plant is around 5 parts per trillion, so well under the 20 parts per trillion threshold. And as Jeff was saying, there are some EPA limits that everyone will have to meet by 2029. That gets a little more complicated. I'll talk about in my next slide. There are 2 PFAS parameters that have to meet the limit of 4 parts per trillion. That's PFO on PFAS. And then there's 4 that is under what's called the health hazard index. It's a complicated calculation that I have done on the next slide for you that shows what the current wells around the turf field have. And as you move down, we have, as Jeff was saying, the 2 landfills down here that have PFAS currently in them, the proposed site area with the irrigation wells that have over 20 parts per trillion current in there that the school is currently irrigating their fields with. As you have the water coming up in this direction, you have Mapleville Mobile Home Park. One of their wells did have some PFAS in it, 13.55. However, their distribution was not detected. And as you move up, there are 2 public water systems, one in particular that's under do not drink order with the latest round of testing of 136 for the Rhode Island 6. Glendale water system, happy to say, is not detected. And then there's another public water system further down that is over 20. In the previous testing, the last round of testing, their well was under 20 parts per trillion. As I was saying, in my spreadsheet, we did do a latest round of testing. So we have the irrigation well. There are currently 6 PFAS parameters that EPA is looking at, and 6 that Rhode Island is looking at. They don't completely overlap. PFOA and PFAS are the 2 primary, the most, let's say, the worst PFAS you can have. What was that?
It'll be on the website.
All right, it will be on the website. I'm not sure. I'm not good at technology and these things. I'm not sure how, but I can read the numbers for you. So the irrigation well, here's the important thing, anything in pink is over limits. It's over regulation. So anything that's highlighted in pink, that's over drinking water regulations. PFOA in the irrigation well, that has the limit of 4, or will have the enforceable limit of 4 in 2029. That is currently 8.67. PFAS, thankfully in the irrigation well, is only 2.21. But when you add all the Rhode Island 6 together, you have 22.3 for the Rhode Island 6. The other 4 that EPA is looking at, when I was talking about the health hazard index, are the PFHSS, the PFNA, what's called Gen X chemicals, and the PFBS. That's a ratio formula that can't go over 1. Currently, that is 0.48. If you get into the abandoned well, that had some high PFOA and PFAS. You can see those pink there. So PFOA in the abandoned well is 8.7. The PFAS in the abandoned well is 7.08. And the Rhode Island 6 for that one is 25.22. And the health hazard index is under 1 for that one at 0.47. Then we get into the 2 new wells the town put in for monitoring of the wells. We have, again, PFOA over the limit at 9.4, and PFAS, technically, DOH wouldn't even consider this a hit, it's under 2, and it wouldn't be counted in the Rhode Island 6, but like I said, I'm more conservative, I count it. So that Rhode Island 6 is 15.57. Interestingly enough, the other irrigation monitoring well we put in, it had not detected for all the PFAS that are currently regulated. The one thing that we were reviewing the latest round of the Eurofins reports, the one particular test that I took, or Northeast Water Solutions took the most interest in, is the SQLP testing. And that is, I'm sure, TRC will talk more about that, but that more closely represents runoff water and how the rain will interact with PFAS. This had good results from what I can only talk on what the report says, but there were no violations for drinking water regulations. The highest values, all of these wouldn't even be counted by DOH. These are all well under 2. And in most laboratory settings that I've seen, the detection limits or reportable limit that laboratories usually will report out is 1. The highest level for the actual turf, the grass itself, was PFOA at 1 part per trillion. And then they also ran the from, and that was all non-detected. Now I'm going to hand it off to Bob Ferrari. He's going to talk about possible treatments moving forward, that how you would treat PFAS in drinking water loss.
Evening, Bob Ferrari. I'm the president of Northeast Water Solutions, which is a professional engineer with 46 years experience. I actually want to go back a bit here to this slide. We've been working with PFAS contamination in Rhode Island. Sorry. In Rhode Island, they initiated a statewide evaluation of PFAS contaminants in drinking water approximately 2016 and 2017. Did a monitoring program, started out with principally community public water systems, and then added other non-community systems based on certain criteria. In 2017, the down in Oakland Village, it's not shown on here, but Oakland Village had the highest PFAS results in any groundwater well in the state of Rhode Island. And that initiated an evaluation. My firm myself performed that evaluation, and that resulted in the recommendation of disconnect the folks who are on the Oakland Association public water system from their well and connect them into the Harrisville Fire District system. That's how that was dealt with at that time. A few other things just to add in here. Jeff and Danielle have given me some information. This is the overall Branch River Basin, covers most of Burrillville. It flows generally east. We have the Chepachet River coming in, the Clear River coming in from the west, Nipmuc coming from the north, Chepachet River comes from the south, Gloucester, where the Clear and Chepachet rivers combine, it becomes a branch river which flows northeast. When you get past the middle school, it takes a sharp turn southeast before it enters the upper Slatersville Reservoir and continues to the east, ultimately joining the rest of the watershed, which flows down to from American Spain and just north province. Having said all that, it's a black salt watershed. There's a lot of monitoring going on right now. The state is having most of the public water systems, the community systems in the state have to do monitoring. So there's a database is being built. We are currently evaluating a exploratory well field in the area along the Branch River near the school, middle school, behind middle school. Trying to get the point of the work that they might find skills. The work right here on the Branch
Okay.
River. Okay, we've done some exploratory work. The reason we selected this area was because there's too many contaminant threats further upstream, such as the landfills. We will be doing additional work in addition to all the other monitoring going on. We'll be doing We're initiating in a few weeks a testing program of the Branch River, the actual water quality and the water flowing in the river, as well as doing work along the bank. The one other thing I want to point out, the monitoring program at the school here. There's 4 monitoring wells. 2 of them are drilled bedrock wells. The other 2 that were constructed at the western end of the proposed field location are overburden wells. They're shallow wells that, so we can evaluate both the groundwater in the soils coursing through the campus and under the field. We can also evaluate the water quality and potential PFAS, well, the actual PFAS contamination in bedrock, in the groundwater, it's in the bedrock. And that's an important consideration. You have to look at both, okay? So I just want to touch on that briefly before getting on to the questions by treatment. For right now, there's a number of systems, public water systems in Rhode Island that are requiring treatment for PFAS. If you're not aware of this, there are many thousands of PFAS compounds. 6 of them are regulated. This is from US EPA. It's not a Rhode Island decision. It's EPA's decision. The state of Rhode Island did as I mentioned before, a 3-year-long statewide survey of PFAS in drinking water wells. And out of that, my firm, and I was the project manager for this work, did a statewide evaluation of all the data, evaluated treatment alternatives, developed treatment requirements based upon different water quality limits, starting at the EPA advisory, 70 parts per trillion, and then evaluating just water quality limits of 35 parts per trillion, 20, 10, 5, and 2. By the way, at that time, you couldn't find 5 or 2 in the water because the laboratory instrumentation, for all practical purposes, couldn't detect down that low. And now, couldn't at the time. And that was the technical basis for ultimately the legislation that passed a year or 2 ago with the current limit of 20 parts per trillion for the PFAS 6, because only 6 of them are regulated for drinking water. Okay, we'll keep that in mind. This is just a picture. It's just a typical. It's not any particular. It's not in Rhode Island. These are carbon filters. These are large carbon filters. They're probably 8 feet in diameter. There's 2 primary process technologies that can treat for PFAS. Remove it. PFAS is, they're called forever chemicals for a reason. Very hard to get rid of them. When they get into the ground, they don't absorb too much of anything. They don't absorb the soil particles. No uptake in vegetation and root systems. They just continue. They're going to be very highly variable in ground. That's been the experience overall. You can sample a well every week and you're going to get different concentrations on a week-to-week basis. That's been the experience. There's 2 technologies that have been defined or established at this point in time that can treat PFAS. One is granular activated carbon filtration, and the other is PFAS selective anion exchange resin. Not all granular activated carbon can remove PFAS. It's just certain grades of carbon. You can go out and buy a carbon filter. You can hook it up to, say, well water supply. You happen to have a well, you might find out that you're not removing PFAS. Why? Because it's not the correct carbon to do. For larger scale public systems, and indeed, if there was a problem with drinking water in Burrillville, treatment would be necessary. You start out by running a pilot plant. The reason you run a pilot plant is because you need to run a test for weeks or even months to assess the performance of the proposed treatment technology. We're doing pilot plants for a number of systems right now, and we're evaluating multiple grades of carbon. We're evaluating anion exchange. Every system, every situation is site specific. Okay, this is not a one size fits all. Not even close. Purpose of a pilot plant is you not only evaluate the treatment process alternative, you're gonna have different pre-treatment requirements before you get to the carbon or anion exchange for removal of PFAS. And then you will also have to establish your design criteria, your operating conditions, control requirements, monitoring requirements. It's all site specific. You have a number of situations where you have iron and manganese in the water, and you have to remove that first. Okay? You have a high chloride content in the water. That will affect treatment processes. You have to look at things like pH. You have to look at suspended solids. You have to look at certain organics. And a lot of things can affect the performance of a treatment system. And that's why everyone is site specific. You don't have the pilot plant, you do process design, you produce your design documents. You have to go through the Department of Health, you have an application process. Okay? Called an application for approval. The application form is 1 page long. It's real easy. However, you're going to need a lot of documentation behind that application. Then you go to construction. Then you go to system startup and validation. The validation can be an extended process. Okay. URI is just starting this right now on their temporary treatment system. They anticipate will be in place for 3 years before the permanent treatment system is installed. And then you have, once you're started up, you're gonna have a long-term operation and maintenance program. And that would be, these are very involved programs because you have to do a lot of water quality monitoring for operational purposes to ensure your system's operating correctly. You have equipment to maintain. Carbon has a finite capacity, just like the anion exchange rests under finite capacity. You have to be monitoring your system to know when you have to replace those materials. Okay. Just what it's worth, there are funding programs available through the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank. That's that acronym. You see if there are RIB. And also Department of Health. These are under programs called emerging contaminants. And there are other funding programs and more conventional funding programs through the state revolving fund. And there's also other federal funds beyond, say, conventional sciences. So that's just a little overview of the treatment was determined to be necessary. What I will further add is simply that the town has contracted with my firm, and there are other firms that are involved. ERC is involved also. We'll hear from them tonight. We started out with, when the town came to us, because we're working with them on a lot of other things and doing a lot of other work statewide on PFAS contamination, it said, when the turf field goes down, or it's installed, you have to do baseline monitoring. Town, working with Jeff and the other town officials, made a big push. We had to get some additional monitoring wells, 2 additional wells installed at the site, done. Several weeks ago, we had to get those wells evaluated and tested. We did that. We got samples, so now at least we have, relative to the field, we have initial round of baseline monitoring, and Danielle presented some of that data a few minutes ago. And going forward, there's going to be, we're looking at up to a 5-year program initially of monitoring, quarterly monitoring. Some will be twice a year for the landfills, but quarterly around the field, because you have to build a database. One other thing I want to caution folks on is that there's a lot. If you can Google this on the internet, you're going to find a lot of articles. I've done a lot of this research already to try to stay current. It's a lot of data. And you'll hear things. There's a lot of different turf designs, turf formulations. It's different manufacturers. They're not all the same as far as the type of materials they're using and how they're installed. There's a lot of different materials involved. I'm not going to get into that tonight, I don't think. But what's really important here is every field that's installed is focusing on synthetic turf athletic fields. Every situation is unique. So you can read about something happening in one locale, somewhere else in the country, or even in Europe or South America, and doesn't mean you're going to have the exact same set of conditions here. okay? And I just want to caution folks as you do that. Every system, whether it's a drinking water system, whether it's a turf field, whether it's a landfill, it's all, every system, every facility is unique. Keep that in mind, there's hundreds of variables. That concludes my comments, and we'll have a questions later on. Thank you.
Okay, so hi, everybody. My name is Liz Dunley, and I'm chemistry director, and I lead PFAS initiative at TRC, which is an international environmental consulting firm. So I'm a chemist. I've been with TRC for about 24 years. I've been in the industry over 30 years. I have my experience listed up here for your benefit, but I've definitely worked on in the last 8 years or so, many different types of PFAS investigations. My main focus is always on chemistry, sampling, data interpretation, forensics, and analytical methodology. So I've also assisted a few other communities with similar matters in regards to the turf and PFAS. So TRC, we submitted a report addendum this week to the town. It was an independent evaluation of the results of PFAS analyses performed on the actual material that's proposed for use at Burrillville High School. So the carpet turf material and the crumb rubber infill. And we did 3 different analyses or tests on these samples. And it's important, tonight we're going to describe how the 3 different tests are performed and what kind of information that they provided us. So the first test here that was performed is what we call solvent extraction. So the lab took a measured aliquot of each sample. They extracted each sample in the solvent that's capable of extracting or pulling out the PFAS right out of the material. And you can see here the solvent was methanolic potassium hydroxide, and then an extract is generated from that, and it's analyzed for the 40 different PFAS chemicals. So this test is done to provide information on which PFAS, if any, are potentially in the materials. And the results from the tests are then used to evaluate human health risks from dermal contact. As we can be pretty certain no one will be ingesting this material, any potential risks from the turf field for human health will be from dermal contact or touching the materials. So both of these materials showed non-detect results for the PFAS chemicals. So therefore, we can confidently state that this test demonstrated that there's no potential risk of PFAS from dermal exposure to these materials. So I am a chemist, so I'm going to give you a quick chemistry lesson because it's going to help me better explain the next PFAS test that we did on the different materials, which was called the top assay procedure. So PFAS stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. And it's very, very important to understand the difference between per and poly. So perfluoroalkyl substances, this means a fully fluorinated alkyl tail that's saturated with fluorine. So what does that really mean in layman's terms? So you can see this first example here, I have listed, it's PFOA. And you can see what's called an alkyl tail on the left side of the molecule, okay? It's that long chain of carbons over that red line. And you can see each carbon is fully saturated with fluorine. So we only see fluorine connected to the carbon molecules here. And this carbon-fluorine bond is the shortest and strongest bond in nature, which makes these chemicals so persistent in the environment. Now let's look at the polyfluoroalkyl substance. Okay, so now we see, what you can see here is a non-fluorine atom attached to at least one carbon atom in that alkyl tail. So some of the carbons where those arrows are pointed are bonded to hydrogen instead of fluorine. It's not fully saturated with fluorine like that perfluoroalkyl compound PFOA above. So these polyfluoroalkyl compounds, they're less stable. They have these weaker carbon-hydrogen bonds, and they're more open to transformation because of that. So these polyfluoroalkyl compounds can actually transform in the environment into the perfluoroalkyl compounds, and we refer to these as precursors. Okay, so what's pictured here is a fluorotelomer. This one can actually transform into PFOA. So understanding the difference between per and polyfluoroalkyl substances will help everybody in understanding the next test we did on these turf materials. So the second test we performed was what we called a total oxidizable precursor assay, or TOP assay. So here, a very strong oxidation is performed on the samples. The samples are oxidized with persulfate, and then they're heated for 6 hours. Remember, we just discussed, remember those polyfluoroalkyl compounds that have the weaker carbon-hydrogen bond? They can transform. They're not as persistent as the perfluoroalkyl compounds like PFOA and PFOS. So this test provides information on whether there may be other PFAS in the sample, other than the 40 that were measured in the first test, that may transform into the regulated perfluoroalkyl PFAS that we're measuring over time. So the purpose of the TOP assay is to determine if there's these PFAS precursors present in these samples. There's thousands of potential PFAS precursors, only several that are commonly analyzed for by a commercial laboratory. So TOP assay, it's not designed to identify and report on the full suite of PFAS compounds present in each sample, but through that strong oxidation, the TOP assay analysis causes the breakdown of those PFAS precursor compounds into the ones that we're measuring and regulating. It will not break down the persistent compounds like PFOA and PFOS. Will only break down precursors. So in essence, the TOP assay is kind of accelerating the natural rate of transformation of PFAS in the environment. It pretty much gives us a worst case scenario because we know that this type of forced oxidation is not going to happen naturally in the environment. So if the sample had elevated levels of polyfluoroalkyl precursors, we would expect to see an increase in those perfluoroalkyl compounds, the transformation products like PFHXA, PFOA, and PFBA. So in the case of the Burrillville materials, we detected trace concentrations of 1 perfluoroalkyl PFAS in each sample. So let's look at that. Okay, so these are the TOP assay results from the different materials that we analyzed. So only 1 PFAS was detected, perfluorobutanoic acid was detected in each sample. So let's look at the figure here. So just to get your bearings on the figure, that green bar there represents the US EPA regional screening level for residential soil for PFBA. The purple bar represents the lowest criteria for soil in the New England states. Because since Rhode Island does not have specific soil standards for PFAS, we use the lowest soil standard from the New England states in the evaluation. The orange boxes represent the concentrations of PFBA that were detected in each sample. And note, it was impossible for me to plot these concentrations to scale on this figure with such high soil standards, but they're very low. So the results in both samples were trace concentrations. They were actually below the lab's detection or reporting limit. This PFBA was also detected in the laboratory's method blank. So the presence of PFBA in each sample is likely related to a lab contamination issue and likely probably a false positive result, and that's not uncommon. But regardless, even if we consider these results real and not due to lab contamination, you can see they are orders of magnitude 19,000 to 169,000 times lower than the EPA's regional screening level for residential soil or the lowest New England state soil criteria for PFBA. So the results from this test are then used, like we did with the solvent extraction, to evaluate human health risks from dermal contact. And again, we know that any potential human health risk from this turf field would be from dermal contact or touching those materials. So based on these TOP assay results, we can confidently state that this test demonstrated that there is no potential risk of PFAS from dermal exposure to these materials. So just in case some of you are wondering, why we're comparing turf material results to soil standards, comparing these turf material results to soil screening criteria is really considered a highly conservative approach. Soil screening criteria are developed assuming exposures over a period of 24 hours per day, 350 days per year, for 6 years for non-cancerous effects, and exposures over a period of 24 hours a day, 350 days a year for a combined 26 years for carcinogenic effects. In addition, these soil standards are developed with the assumption that the primary exposure route will be through ingestion. So with the turf, we can confidently state that the exposures will not be anywhere near 24 hours a day for 350 days a year, and the primary route of exposure will be through limited dermal contact, not through ingestion. So all that being said, with the PFBA results we just saw, being orders of magnitude below these conservative standards, we can confidently say that there is no human health risk from PFAS in the turf carpet and the foam rubber. Okay, and the third test we did is called SPLP, which stands for Synthetic Precipitation Leaching Procedure. And SPLP is used to determine the leachability of PFAS from the turf materials into the environment. So into groundwater, surface water, into the aquifer. So just because PFAS or any chemical might be in a product, it does not necessarily mean that that chemical will leach from the material. So the SPLP test helps us to determine that. So with the SPLP, a measured amount of the turf material is extracted for 18 to 24 hours in a slightly acidic water matrix. So in essence, it's trying to mimic acid rain. So at the end of the day, we can use the SPLP results to evaluate if there's a pathway for infiltration of PFAS to groundwater and runoff into local water bodies. So there were no PFAS detected in the leachate of the foam rubber and infill material, meaning there's no potential risk to groundwater, surface water, or the aquifer from this foam rubber material. We saw trace concentrations of 3 PFAS chemicals in the leachate of the turf carpet sample, and we're going to take a look at those results in a little more detail on this one. Okay, so the 3 PFAS that were detected in the leachate of the turf carpet sample were PFHPA, perfluorooctanoic acid, perfluorooctanoic acid, PFOA, and perfluorooctane sulfonic acid, PFOS. So again, to just explain the figure a little bit, the purple bars there represent the Rhode Island DEM standards for groundwater and drinking water at 20 nanograms per liter for the 3 PFAS chemicals. The blue bars represent the Rhode Island standard for surface water at 70 nanograms per liter for each of these 3 PFAS chemicals. And the green bars that you can see, they're kind of small there, are for PFOA and PFOS only, and they represent the US EPA's maximum contaminant level, or MCL, at 4 nanograms per liter for each of those 2 chemicals. The orange boxes, which are almost virtually impossible to see because they're so small, represent the concentrations of each of the 3 PFAS chemicals detected in the turf carpet sample. Remember, there was no PFAS detected in the foam rubber infill. So the results for each of these 3 PFAS were trace concentrations. Again, they were below the lab detection limit or reporting limit. Also, like we saw earlier for PFOS, that one was also detected in the lab's method blank at a trace concentration. So the presence of PFOS in this sample, again, probably due to lab contamination, likely a false positive, but regardless of the blank contamination, let's just assume it's real. You can see that all of these compounds, they're significantly below the Rhode Island DEM groundwater, drinking water, and surface water standards, and well below the US EPA MCLs. And in addition to being well below these standards, also we need to remember there will probably also be a further dilution effect upon entering the aquifer. So if we sum the concentrations of these 3 PFAS and we compare that to the Rhode Island criteria, they do look at the sum of 6. So look at comparing it to the 20 nanogram per liter criteria, we're at about 10% of that standard. You can see the sum of the 3 is about 2.04 nanograms per liter. Remember, the number, which is 10% of the Rhode Island standards, represents what we were able to aggressively leach out of these samples. So most of what we could get with a fairly aggressive test is 10% of the Rhode Island drinking water, groundwater criteria. Most of you are probably already likely drinking water with more PFAS than we were able to pull out of this material. So based on the SPLP extraction, we can confidently state with this test, that it demonstrated that in the case of the foam rubber infill, they mentioned PFAS are not leaching off that material, not becoming mobile. In the case of the turf carpet sample, we can confidently state there's no potential risk to groundwater, surface water, and the aquifer from the trace concentrations which did leach off of the material. So overall, the tests that were performed over the last month on the proposed materials for Burrillville have been consistent with the evaluation of other products we have done for similar municipalities in the past, and similar types of projects.
Thank you, Elizabeth. He'll go on this one.
I'm Dennis Anderson from the Town Council. Can you hear me? Is it on? I thought it would be a useful exercise after that excellent explanation of the 3 tests that were done and the results for the exact materials that are going to be proposed for this site. Now, keep in mind, and it's on the website, there were already 29 tests of the turf material that was the same, but not ours. And there were 2 previous crumb rubber tests that were the same, but not ours. And as Liz just said, these results were consistent with that. So out of that 29, there were 12 solvent extraction tests. 11 got nothing, just like the one we had. There was 11 other leaching tests. 10 got nothing. 1 had a trace, just like we had. There were 6 other top assay tests. 3 had nothing. 3 had traces, like ours did. It turns out that where we did get something from the recent Eurofins testing, it tends to be the biggest number. And as she already explained, and before that from Northeast Water, the numbers we're dealing with are below a reporting limit where they don't even have to claim them. But we're going to be conservative. We're going to use everything we found. And I want to walk you through the calculation of how much PFAS is in this entire field and the crumb rubber. And the numbers may be hard to see. Feel free to follow along in your calculator. I don't need to look at them because they're all right here. The turf is 47 ounces per square yard. There's 9 square feet in a square yard. You divide that and it comes out about 5.22 ounces per square foot. You multiply it times 88,000 square feet and you get a little under 460,000 ounces for the weight of the entire turf. You multiply that times 28.35 grams per ounce times 1,000 milligrams per gram, and you get something over 13 billion milligrams as the weight of the field. The top assay test said we had 4.1 parts per billion. We take that 13 billion plus times 4.1 parts per billion, divide by a billion, and we get 53 milligrams of PFAS in the entire turf. A drop of water weighs 50 milligrams. Okay, so the amount of PFAS in the entire field is the equivalent weight of 1 drop of water. You can decide if you think that's a big amount or a small amount, but that's what it is. That's the fact. From the leachate testing, as Liz said, even that minuscule amount is very difficult to extract from the turf with a leaching process that uses an acid that's more conservative than a natural leaching. So we've got a minuscule amount, 1 drop of water's worth, that's very difficult to pull out of the turf. We look at the crumb infill. The 2 previous tests found nothing in every test. We only found something in the top assay test to the tune of 0.65 parts per trillion. Now, the crumb rubber goes on at 3 pounds a square foot. Times, say, 88,000 square feet is 264,000 pounds. You multiply that times 16 ounces per pound, times 28.35 grams per ounce, times 1,000 milligrams per gram, and you get almost 120 billion milligrams of crumb rubber. And when you multiply that by the 0.65 and divide by a billion, you get 78 milligrams of PFAS, the equivalent of a drop and a half of water in this 264,000 pounds of crumb rubber. But we already knew that from the leachate test, we can't get it out. So that 78's meaningless because we can't get it out of there anyway. So you're back to the PFAS in the turf, which is the equivalent weight of 1 drop of water. And it's hard to get out. Those are the facts. on our particular field, and they're consistent with the other similar but not our stuff. So you can think about it in your own mind as to how concerned you are about the equivalent of 1 drop of water's worth of PFAS by weight, because that's what it is. That's the end of my story. I just want you to understand there's 5th grade arithmetic that will let you calculate exactly from the most conservative tests we've done, the very small amount of PFAS that exists in this turf.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. All right, before we move on to public comment, well, actually, public comment and recognition of comments sent in, I've got a closing statement. Can you all hear me? The test results from Eurofins, a world-renowned test laboratory, have shown that there is no danger to our aquifer, to our athletes from this field and from the crumb rubber. As Dennis said, facts are facts. You can all have opinions. We can have opinions. We all have them. You know what they're like. But facts are facts. Some may not like these facts, but it doesn't change the facts. This field, with its year-round bright green surface, its bright lines, a Bronco logo at midfield, colored end zones with Broncos prominently labeled, will be an inspiration to our youth. It will encourage participation. It will instill pride in our community, and more so in themselves as they take the field to play on it. A turf field will provide the town and the schools with not only a beautiful complex, but one that the students can be proud of to play on in any weather conditions. This field is an investment in the town and will help the district, the school district, attract and keep students who, in the age of school choice, are interested in athletics as well as academics. Recreational league games held at the turf field will attract visitors to our town, which in turn will help local businesses as visitors spend time and money in our community before and after those games. The town's water districts, the Rhode Island DOH and DEM, and the Burrillville School Committee have asked the town council to perform due diligence. Through our exemplary administrative team, including the town manager, the town clerk, the director of DPW, our consultants, Northeast Water Solutions and TRC, and many other key personnel, we've done so, and the results are clear. This project will not affect our environment. It will not affect our aquifer and drinking water, nor will it affect human health. Participants using this field are not in danger from PFAS.